Okay, so we are now on the second subsection of the methodology. We have here the research local. The title itself is research local, and it literally means the venue or the site or the area where your study will be conducted. Okay, so example, your residents, you will be conducting survey sa residents sa General Santos City, then your research local will be the whole General Santos City. But if you are going to have a lot of areas, no, kasi for example sa mga experimental na mga studies, you really have to mention in the research local where are you going to get your plant samples, your animals, but the main research local is the place wherein you will really do the experiment. So for example, after gathering all the materials from the different places, you will be conducting the experiment at the Pharmacy Laboratory of General Santos City Doctors Medical School Foundation Incorporated. That will be the main research local in your study. So another thing is you have to provide a map of, for example, a map of General Santos City. You may provide the map of the whole Philippines and then pointing to another map which is the General Santos City. For those who will be conducting sa school, you may also include a map of the whole General Santos City, but you have to identify where doctors is located. But these maps are not really found in the methodology section. Instead, this will be found in the appendices. So in the appendices, I think I have mentioned that dati na these appendices are important things in research, but they are they are not really needed to be included sa sa text sa inyong paper. Dili sila i-include sa introduction, sa methodology. So dito sila sa appendices ibutang. That will be under the references. Okay? Again, that will be under the references. After you have the methodology, tapos references, tapos appendices, and then curriculum vitae. Mo na siya ang pagpasunod. So other things that you will also include in the appendices are like letters, like letter of permission from the dean that you are going to conduct your study, a letter of permission from the laboratory in charge na you will use the laboratory sa school and you will conduct the experiment. A letter to the validators. Example, you have questionnaires and then your questionnaires need to be validated by experts. So you need also to write them a letter asking na you will have your questionnaires validated. So those letters again should be found sa appendices. So you may draft it now. You are 5 or 6 in your group. So you may also draft the letters para makita ng panel that you have sample letters that you will be going to give to those people. Other than that, mga certificates, pero wala pa naman tayong certificates ngayon, so wala pa tayong i-include na certs doon sa inyong appendices. Yung mga certs kasi like certificate from the validator, certificate from the botanist, kasi especially those who have plant materials, you need your plant to be authenticated by a botanist that, for example, it is really Colocasia esculenta taro, kasi daghan man na sila nga family, so kailangan ma-identify yun na yes, mauna siya ang plant na nga nakabutang sa inyong research. Or mga certificate from the veterinarian that your animals are really healthy and suitable for research. Mao na siya, appendices na siya tanan, including the map. Okay, for your research local. Now, take note, class, that if your venue is an institution, again, if it's an institution like GSDMSFI, you have to include a brief history, a brief introduction of the history of the institution, and also you have to include its mission and vision with its specific objective. I believe you can get the brief history and even the mission and vision of the school from the student handbook. I hope you have a copy of that so that you may include that one in your study. Again, this will be for those who will be conducting sa school. But if you are going to conduct your research in General Santos City only, kasi you will just have your survey, you may just describe Gensan, General Santos City, in terms of like the place, the population, what else, pila ka barangay, ano lang. I-describe lang ninyo siya what Jensen is. Okay, that's for the research local. Any question about the research local? Let me see if I have a sample here of the research local. This will be after the research design, ha? No. This is not a complete paper. But anyway, sige, this is, since this is not an edited paper kasi, ayan. So, di ba, after the method, after the research design, you have the research local. So, for the research local, again, this study is conducted sa GSD-MSFI. It's a non-sectarian institution, but since this is not a complete paper kasi, I was not able to give the brief introduction or history of the school, and I have not yet placed the specific mission and vision of the school. But when you write this, you have to include those things, ha? The research local. Okay? The next part will be the respondents of the study and the sampling technique. Instead of sampling procedure, please use the sampling technique. But in some cases, they merge these two. Kaning duha na ni respondents of the study of the sampling procedure, ginamix na nila, and we call it class sampling technique. So the header is called sampling technique, and then under the sampling technique, first you will be mentioning the respondents of your study, including their identities and characteristics. So who will be your respondents? Will that be the residents of General Santos City or other parts of the Philippines? Or if you are going to use an animal, then you have to mention that the subjects of your study will be like albino rats or albino rabbits. And then you have to describe their characteristics. Okay, so include description of the circumstances under which the respondents preferred. So example, meron kayong criteria in selecting your respondents of the study. So gusto ninyo babae lang tanan, gusto ninyo lalaki lang tanan. You also have to mention that one under the sampling technique. And the reason nga no, kung gusto ninyo age 20 to 35 years old lang, i-mention ninyo na siya. Pero you have to justify why. Why kana lang na certain group sa population ang inyuhang kailangan. Okay? Again, that will be under the sampling technique. The first thing you have to do is to introduce the respondents of your study. So example, we have here, the respondents of the study were members of the Senior Citizens Association of Cabanatuan City. But this one is in the past tense na form because this is from a completed study. However, class, please take note that you have not yet done your study. Therefore, everything should be in future tenses. Okay? Future tense sa verb ang atuang gamiton. So this time we have here the respondents are the Senior Citizens Association of Cabanatuan City. The respondents who account for 60% of the SSS retirees only were selected through purposive sampling. So kasi pag naa naman good kay criteria class, please take note. Once you will mention a criteria in selecting your respondents, it automatically becomes a purposive sampling. Okay? Pag nag-mention na mo din ha na kanilang inyuhang gusto, ang example, residents, inyuhang respondents will be residents sa General Santos City. But ang gusto ninyo nga residents kay mga Generation X lang, that automatically becomes a purposive sampling. It will no longer be a random sampling kasi you already mentioned unsa lang inyuhang needed na part sa population. Kaya kung random sampling na, 'di ba? Ingon ko, random sampling is a probability sampling where everyone in the population has an equal chance. Pero pag ni-mention na ka og purpose or kanang criteria, then wala na chance ang tanan to be selected in your study. So another criteria nga gi-mention niya diri, only the respondents who could read and write and who could still attend meetings of the association were counted as samples. Hence, out of 150 samples, 90 were made respondents. This one is an example sa respondents of the study pa na siyang apart. Pero sa atua class, let's merge the two. Dili na ninyo kailangan ibutang ni nga header respondents of the study. Ibutang na lang ninyo siya under sa sampling technique. But nevertheless, parehas ani, the first thing na i-mention is kinsa ang respondents sa study. We have here the respondents of the study were the graduates of Bachelor of Science in Pharmacy students of GSD-MSFI who took up Pharmacology 1 and 2 in the institution from 2015 to 2020. Okay? And then the next thing na isulat ninyo under the sampling technique, again, emerge nato niha kaning duha, respondents of the study and the sampling procedure. And then we will call it sampling technique. And then after that, you will be identifying the sampling technique that you are going to use in your study. So parehas ani, since I have mentioned that I only need the pharmacy students who took up PhCol 1 and PhCol 2 from 2015 to 2020, I have already stated a criteria there kung sino lang ang kailangan ko, then automatically the sampling technique becomes purposive sampling. Okay? And mao na siya ang sunod ninyong i-discuss after mentioning the respondents of the study. I-discuss ninyo what will be your sampling technique. Okay? I'll be mentioning again the different sampling techniques that we have. So we have before that, let's have a review, a little review of the population and sample. Sige, later. Sige, population and sample. So when you say population class, it is a group of people or a group of like animals na naadira tanang elements under consideration. So it's actually also called the universe of the study. And tanan nga characteristics nga naa din ha sa population will be called parameters. Okay, parameters siya. Example sa population, you need all the first year pharmacy students in GSD-MSFI. That's considered a population. Or all the RadTech faculty and in GSD-MSFI. Bisag duha lang na sila kabuok, it's still called a population. And then the senior citizens in General Santos City. So please look at your study, identify what is your population. Okay, so we have two types of population again. We have finite and infinite population. When you say finite population, these are the population that can be counted. So just like the first year pharmacy students at GSD-MSFI, we can count them. We can even ask the registrar pila ka book atong first year, and that's it. We have the number. Therefore, it's a finite population. But if you cannot count a certain population, we call it infinite. For example, the stars in the sky, you cannot count it. Even the numbers of pedestrians that will cross a certain street, you cannot count it. And it varies from one day to another. So it's an infinite population. Okay? And then, ang uban kay mag-ulit-ulit pa, magbalik-balik. Okay, wait lang ha. Nagtubag si Ma'am Eroy. Did you submit the part 2? Wait lang, let us not record this. Okay, after identifying class, the population of your study, we will be getting the sample. So the sample class is a small group that is taken from the population. So in research, we don't really take all the members of the population and have them included in our study. Dili na siya ing ana sa research. We just identify our population and from there we take our sample. So we have the following reasons why we don't really use the whole population in the research. Number one, it is very expensive to get the entire population. Okay? Medyo lisod no pag moingon kag all residents of General Santos City nuts kanus apa nimo ma-reach out ang tanang residents sa Gensan kung 1 million takabuok para sa patamahuman ana sa ato ang research. And that will cost us a lot kasi we have to reach everyone in Gensan. And then it takes a lot of time to reach what is known as target population. So aside sa cost, also the time. Wait lang. Sige, yun na ako tubagon si Madam. Okay. And then sampling enables us to do some Sampling enables us to do some inferences or generalizations about the target population. So even though we don't include all the members of the population, but the information class nga makuha nato sa atong sample class is actually enough for us to make generalizations or conclusions, inferences for our study. So mao na siya nga naatay sampling technique. So after the research local will be the sampling technique. Ulito nako, ang first thing you will write for the sampling technique will be the introduction for your respondents, and then after that will be the sampling technique itself. Now we have the sampling steps in sampling. Again, the first one is syempre you need to identify your population. And then after identifying your population, you have to determine the required sample size. So it is really necessary for you to know, to identify pila gyud ka buok ang members sa imuhang population. Thus, if you say residents of General Santos City, you have to get the census kung unsa nakadaghan ang residents sa Gensan. Okay? Kanang ang ilahang address gyud class kay Gensan. Okay? Kailangan ninyo na makuha kung asa man na dapat kuhaon sa PSA or even kung makita ninyo siya sa internet, okay lang. Okay lang kung makita ninyo sa internet ang current population sa Gensan. Okay? And then selection of the sample. But for the ganap ako tanan ni Mary distraction klase. Wait lang. For the animals class, animals did na study, experimental, we don't need to compute for the sample size anymore. Kasi wala po kabalo kung unsa nakadaghan ng rabbit sa tibuok kalibutan or sa tibuok Gensan. So that will be considered an infinite population. And thus, we only select atong mga number of animals required in each procedure. Idiretso na ninyo siya state dito na you need 36 animals, 12 will be for the OECD and etc. We will just mention kung di unsa nato sila pag-assign. So the assignment na lang, i-assign nato sila dito sa experimental group, sa positive control group, o sa control group, dapat randomly assigned sila dito para matawag nato siya as true experimental na study. Now for those study nga descriptive and kailangan ninyo og human respondents for your study. So in calculating the sample size, you may use this formula. You really have to state in your study that kung nigamit ba mo og Slovene nga formula or not. This is called the Slovene's formula. N is equal to capital letter N divided by 1 plus capital letter N, E squared. By the way, this is E squared. Wait lang, let me, ay, kanjot lang. Ato siyang, para, kasi, ma-confuse ang uban. Ayan. So, this is squared. I think itudlo ko niya siya sa inyo sa stat, but let's just have a review. Again, small letter n is the sample size, and then the capital letter N is the population size. And then E will be the margin of error, and most of the time, our margin of error is 0.05, or that is 5%. It's the minimum. Actually, the error there is the percentage that we allow as room for error. Kasi since we are not really surveying all the members of the population, we are just taking samples. So nagahatag taog ka ng leeway for error, room for error, and that is just 5%. Okay? So in calculating example, let me write sa screen. Example, you have identified that sabihin yung respondents sa study. Example, ang graduates na lang sa GSD MSFI is example 200 na sila kabuok, and then you need the sample size. Kung sa 200 pila lang ang inyuhang kailangan. So bisag 200 na sa tanong ninyo kaya ra ng 200, pero actually we still need to get the sample size kasi we don't really do population testing sa research. So mag-compute mo class N is equal to capital letter N is 200 divided by 1 plus, take note, capital letter N is still 200, and then i-multiply nato siya sa ato ang room for error or margin of error, which is 0.05. Ayan. But take note na kailangan siya i-square. So 200 divided by 1 plus PEMDAS tayo. So let's start with the 0.05. 0.05 squared is 0.001225. And then after that, PEMDAS gihapon ta, una ang multiplication kesa sa addition. So this is times 200. So this is 0.5. So 200 divided by 1.5, your sample size will be 133. So nana siya decimal, 133.33, pero remember, you cannot, dili mo maka-interview, di mo makahatag o questionnaire sa 0.33 nga tao. So kailangan na siya i-round off into the nearest whole number. Okay? So kung tong sa study nga example ang inyong kailangan kay mga graduate sa doctors. This is just an example ha. Wako kabalog pila nakabuk ang graduate sa doctors. You have to get that from the registrar. So kung example lang 200 na sila kabuok, so you only need 133. So dili pud silang tanan ang inyong kailangan. Okay? Paano kung infinite imuhang population? We will be unsa example sa inyong infinite, kasi most of the time kabalo gyud ta sa population nato good, except na lang mga stars o mga unsa pa na mag-mention ko later kung infinite yun. Pero can I ask unsa ang imuhang ginamin nga infinite din na population? Kailangan while waiting ko bago na ko si Madam. Okay. Generation X. Actually, the Generation X sa Gensan, you can also know the population for that. Ano siya kung ginaingon niya, either you research kung unsa nakadaghan ang Generation X sa Gensan or you ask the Philippine Statistics Authority kung unsa na jud kadaghan ang Generation X sa Gensan. Dili siya considered as infinite na population. So you have to exhaust everything na na makita ninyo kung unsa kadaghan ang Generation X sa Gensan. Okay? So it seems infinite sa inyo ha, pero actually sa research it's still considered finite. Kasi makita na to na siya. Matay data na. So you start doing your research now or kung namoy kaila sa mga, di ba PSA ang ano responsible for that. So mga tanang mo dito. Yeah, you need to you need to solve for the sample size. Example, di ba, you're going to get the stay 9 and then correlate it with the board exam result. So, di ba mag-identify mo og population. So, ang gusto ninyo kay katulang ni graduate from 2014 to 2019. So, you have to identify pila kadaghan ang atuang graduates from 2015 to 2019. And then from there, you calculate the sample size. Okay? But you have, if ever nag-purposive sampling mo, mag-narrow down pa na inyong sample size man go, depende sa criteria ninyo. So, i-identify sa una inyong population with all the criteria involved if ever naa. And then, pag ma-identify na ninyo ang final number sa inyong population, that's the time you solve for it. Meaning, dili tanan sa ni-graduate from 2014 to 2019 ang inyong kailangan kuhaan o stay 9 o board exam result. So kung kinsa lang tong ay kung pila lang inyong na-compute mo lang punto inyong kailangan. Ako tubagon si Ma'am Area. Kaya rin siya pangutan. First takers lang, kanang mga kaisa lang jud nag-take tas nakapasa na din sa board exam. You have to identify that. So, kung naa na mo population, pila ka book ang graduates from 2014 to 2019, from there, i-identify pa ninyo kinsa ang first taker, kaisa lang ni take, nakapasa na dayon. So, man-narrow down ang number sa inyong population. Tapos, kung pila na lang ang nabilin, Hershin, compute paghihapon mo og sample size. Okay?
Okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
So, go, ma'am, tubaga lang samtang active pa siya mo. Actually, yeah, that is why pag mutingog ako sa cellphone tapos makita na ako si Ma'am Eroy nagatubag. Pero gusto ko muhunong magklase tapos tubagon ako si Ma'am Eroy kay masig unya dili ako siya mo reply bisig mabisi mo gud niya. So I need to really follow up. PhRes1 pag send na ko sa ako ang chat kay musin man siya dayon. So dili busy si Madam. Sige. Okay.
Ma'am, ako'y additional na pangutana.
Yes.
Mag-clarify lang ko, ma'am, sa among population size, good, ma'am. Ang first taker lang, ma'am, or katong batch ang among ibutang na population size?
What do you mean batch? Unsa jud ay inyong population?
Ang batch 2015 lang o 2019, ma'am.
So duha lang ka batch?
Yes, ma'am. Tapos among plano, ma'am, idagdag na mo tong karon. Pero wala pa, ma'am, good na, ang result mo tong dili pa mi sure kung idagdag jud na mo siya, ma'am.
Kanang na makapasa karon, wa pa may board exam
Yes,
result.
ma'am.
Pero I think pwede pa ninyo siya mahabol kasi
Gani, ma'am.
ang pinakadugay na manggod nga pag-release sa board exam result kay 2 weeks. Kung dugay na jud kayo ng 2 weeks. Grabe na jud ang agony ana sa nag-take. Pero within this week mugawas na ang result sa karon. Sa karon nga board exam. Pwede ninyo sila idagdag ibutang ninyo sa inyong title unsa nga batch inyong kailangan ha. And then ibutang
Yes,
po na
ma'am.
ninyo siya sa inyong scope and delimitation and sa sampling technique. So kay kana lang man inyong kailangan katong ni graduate 2015 o katong ni graduate og 2019, i-add lang na ninyo siya Hershey, i-add ninyo kung pila sila kabuo, kung 40 ang sa 2015, 30 ang sa 2019, so you have 70. Tapos from there sa 70, i-identify pa ninyo kung kinsa lang tong kaisa lang nag-take and then nakapasa na dayon. So example, ang nabilin kay mga 50 na lang kabuo. So from the 50, you can compute for the sample size. So kung 50 na siya, pila na lang? Compute daw.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. Times 50 plus 1. So 50. So kung 50 na lang ang nabilin, mga 44 lang ang inyong kailangan. So dili jud siya nga to kadaghan man. But you need to reach out these people kasi you have to ask them. We have the data privacy law, so mananghid yun ta sa ilaha. Okay? So that's the sample size, ha? Population of the calculation of the sample size. Any question pa before ta mag-add to sa mga sampling techniques nato? Okay, sige. So sa sampling techniques, we have the rule of the thumb method wherein, for example, class, nag-compute mo sample size ninyo pero dugay kay sila mo reply kanang namang mo gina ang problem nato kanang dili gani mo reply, dili cooperative. So for example 20% lang sa whole population ang nitubag. So okay lang na siya, nga 20% lang ang nitubag pero man good walay statement for validity ang result sa inyong study. Natay result, we can even have conclusion but dili jud kanang matawag na valid ang inyong result kasi again kulang ang respondents. Okay? For descriptive, normative, and survey na research, katong mga mag-survey, we have the so-called central limit theorem. So, ang ato ang rule yun, the greater the sample, the nearer the result approaches the parametric values. So, kinahanglan yun nato class nga pag muingon kag out from 200, kailangan nato og mga 133 ka tao. Kailangan class ma-achieve yun nato ng 133. But for example, wala nato na-achieve ang 133 pero more than 50% siya sa population. So, di ba itong population kay 200? So, ang 50% ana 100. So, okay ra pud na nga dili nato makuha ang the whole 133. As long as mag more than 50% siya, sobra 100 atong makuha, okay lang. So if the population size is not really large, 50% and above can be considered. So kung dili jud kaayo daghan ang ato ang population, so bisan pag dili nato ma-achieve ang ato ang computed sample size, as long as again sobra 50% and above siya, okay lang pod. Walay problema. Now, if ang nakuha nato nga response rate kay less than 50% but more than 30%, I'm talking about the whole population at the sample size, parametric statistics may be considered but interpretations shall be limited for the sample considered. So pwede ta mo gamit og parametric na statistical tests. Please review your statistics class na mention ako dito unsa ang parametric, unsa ang non-parametric. Pero ang akong nahuman lang og discuss sa inyo mga parametric test lang to like the ANOVA, the t-test, parametric test to sila, the Pearson R, pero katong uban nga Spearman raw, phi coefficient, mga non-parametric to sila. Pag ing-ani inyuhang response rate, less than 50 pero more than 30, so pwede na ta mo gamit og parametric test in analyzing our data, pero ang interpretation is for the sample only. We cannot really generalize it for the whole population. Now, if less than 30% ang atuang sample size tapos purposive sampling pagyud ang gigamit, dili siya probability sampling, walay randomization, purposive kasi naatay criteria, interpretation of data are limited also for the sample only. And pag mag-analyze na ta, we will be using a non-parametric test. But anyway, I'll be discussing also sa inyo unsa ang suitable statistical test if ever needed in your study. Okay, so let's have a review of the two kinds of sampling techniques that we have. Remember the probability sampling. Ang pinaka tandaan lang yun ninyo pag makabati mo probability sampling is all members of the population have equal chance na maselect sa atuang study. So meaning they are random samples kasi equal chance man atong gihatag sa ilaha na they can be, example na atay 200, kailangan lang nato 133, though bisag kailangan lang nato 133, katong 200 na sila equal chance na ma-select sila sa study. So kasi pag randomly selected man god, mo na siya atong gina-consider na best representative of the population. Remember, the meaning of the sample is representative sa population. It's taken from the population. So the best one are those selected randomly. Okay? So pag kaniinyong gigamit class na there is randomization, our findings will be valid and ginagamit siya to infer or to have conclusions about the characteristics of our population. Now, the second one is the non-probability sample or non-probability sampling. So, kabaliktaran lang siya sa probability sampling wherein not all elements in the population have equal chance na ma-select sa atuang study. Okay? So, kapag ang gigamit ninyo na sampling is non-probability sampling, then the sample class is not a representative of the population and we cannot really use your data na mag-infer og characteristics sa population. Okay? So let's, any question before ta mag-storya of different probability sampling technique? Any question? Wala. So we have here the different probability sampling technique. The first one is the simple random sampling. So this is best known and most common. Natay two basic principles when you say simple random sampling. The first one is equiprobability, meaning since this is class a probability sampling, then everybody has the equal chance of being chosen in your study. And then we have here independence, meaning one person is independent from another person. So ang iyahang tubag is independent from the other one. And aside from that, ang condition sa isa ka sample should not affect the selection process. Dili ma-select ang chance, dili maapektuhan ang chance sa uban members to be selected in your study. So we have two methods used sa random sampling. You can do the lottery method. You know the lottery method or the fishbowl method. Kanang isulat ninyo ilahang mga pangalan sa papel, ibutang ninyo siya sa bowl and then murag lottery. Kung kinsay mabunot, so siya ang unang ma-select. Tas bunot na sad until class ma-achieve na to ang sample size. And then table of random numbers, like we have a table and then ay mga random numbers din ha, and then ang mga numbers na are actually representative sa mga names sa members of population. Tapos mag-choose, you let pwede siya na you let someone choose numbers and then example choose niya ang number 3. So tanawon nimo kinsa nga person nang naa sa number 3 and ma-select siya to be included in your study. Okay? Questions about the simple random?